Okay, good evening, everybody. It is so wonderful to be here. Welcome back to Mussar Mondays. We are at the end of our series on the 13 principles of faith, and we're at the last principle. But, in my opinion, this is the most important of the 13 principles. The reason why it's the most important is because the way it works in Judaism is we always go up in holiness. We always start from the lowest, and then we work our way up to the we sort of like the climax of our relationship with God. The highest level of that connection is always at the end, right? We start with day number 1 of creation, all the way till the 7th day. Our sages tell us, why was day 1 needed? For day 7. Why was day 2? For day 7. Day 3. It was all a build-up for day 7, which is why the last thing created was Adam. Because it was all made for Adam. You don't invite your guests and then set your table. You first set the table and then invite your guests. Right? The world was created for Adam, for mankind. Now that the world is all set and the world is all ready to go, let's bring in Adam, let's bring in Eve, let's make a party. Right? So now that it's all set, let's understand what the first 12 principles were, and then we're going to get to principle number 13. So just as a quick review, we'll go back to the beginning. And the first is that we believe with perfect faith that God is the creator and ruler of all things. He alone has made, does make, and will make all things, everything. There's no creation that has been created or that will be created ever in the future or that is in existence now that was not created by the Almighty, by Hashem, creator of heaven and earth. We have perfect faith that God is one. There is no unity that is in any way like His. He alone is our God. He was, He is, and He will be. Number 3, I believe with perfect faith that God does not have a body. Physical concepts do not apply to God. And there is nothing whatsoever that resembles God at all. There's nothing. Right? So you say, even when we say that God created man in His image, what does that mean? In the image that God wanted us to be like. Not in God's image, because God doesn't have an image. We just finished saying that God doesn't have a body. Now we're saying God created man in His image. God doesn't have an image. Well, it's the desire. God created us exactly how He wanted us to be. 2 eyes, 2 ears, and so on and so forth. Okay. Number 4, I believe with perfect faith that God is first and last. There's nothing that comes before God and nothing that will follow after God, precede God. Number 5 is I believe with perfect faith that it is only proper to pray to God. One may not pray to anyone or anything else. We don't pray to the stars, to the moon, to the sun. We don't pray to any of that or to any other forces. Certainly not to a stone. You know the famous story with Abraham. So Abraham, young little Abraham, his father Terach, tells him, guess what? I'm going to San Francisco. Right? He tells little Abraham, I'm going to San Francisco to the idolatry conference. So maybe you should have gone to Las Vegas for the conference, right? But either way, so he's going for the conference. He says, little Abraham, listen to me. Be a good boy. Watch over my shop because I have all these really expensive idols here. Please do me a favor. Make sure nobody steals anything. Make sure everything is, anybody who asks any questions, he gives him the code to know what the pricing would be. And he leaves on his trip to the conference. He comes back a week later from the conference, and the entire shop is like smashed to smithereens. Everything is broken, every single idol. So the father asks Abraham. He says, "What's the deal? What happened here?" He says, "Don't even ask." He says, "This idol said he's God," and the other guy says, "Who do you think you are to say you're God?" I'm God. So he says one after the other, they were fighting with each other till they all broke apart to pieces. Right? And this is what's left with all the gods. Right? It's the most ludicrous thing for someone to think or give power to a stone, a mere stone. If the stone can't protect itself, how do you think it can protect you? Obviously can't. Right? So when we see that the world is in many people. I just saw, I'm sure you may have seen this on video, there was somebody who is serving our president as God. He lights candles, he has a whole ceremony of serving. It's someplace in India that he's bowing down every day to a picture of the president. You can just tear up the picture and it's all over, right? What a pity to have, something that disappears like that. But the idea is that there's no power that can create, that can give life, that can take life other than God. We can create clones, we can create many things, but one thing we can't is neshama, a soul. A soul cannot be manufactured, right? Even in University of Texas, right? Even in the greatest laboratories, you can't create a neshama. You can't create a soul. You could create a body. Yeah, we hear many stories of, there was the golem of there are many stories we can get into another time. But yeah, you can make a physical being. You can make a physical entity, but you can't give it a soul. And that's something which is unique and only something that God can do, and that's what we know. That it says, "Vayipach be'apav nishmat chaim." God Himself blew into the nostrils of a living soul. God Himself. So we have sort of, God doesn't have pieces, so it's very, very, we have to understand this in a different way, in an allegorical way. But we have a piece of God within us. Right? We have a piece of heaven, a piece of the Almighty. Now, our sages, we talk about this in our Mussar classes, in the AM Mussar class, that there is a trait. God is perfect. God has 13 attributes, and all of them are perfect. God is all kind. God is all patient. God is all forgiving. God is right. So all of these traits that we learned through them, we've done them in the past. We'll do them again, hopefully in the future. We have pieces of that trait. Is anybody here perfect in kindness? Perfect, perfect, perfect? No, I like to be kind, but when it fits in my schedule, God doesn't say, you know what, I'll give you oxygen when it works with my schedule. No. God is kind. You know what? What's if a parent knows, okay, if a parent knows that their child is going to do something against their will, against the parent's will, you tell the child, don't touch my car, and the child's going to take the keys when you're sleeping and drive the car. So what is the parent going to do? What are the options? Take the keys and hide it. Right? So God knows we're going to sin. So why doesn't God have a much simpler solution? Chop off the hands, and then He's not going to steal anymore. Right? That's why it says Hashem, Hashem. Twice we say the name of Hashem when we say the 13 attributes of mercy. One is prior to sin. God knows we're going to sin. But He has mercy on us. He says, you know what? One day He'll repent. One day He'll come back to me. One day He'll realize that what He did was inappropriate. So there's a second Hashem, which is after the sin. God says, I wait for Him. I await His return. So it's not just Hashem that Hashem has mercy and gives us, even though He knows we may do negative things with those resources that He gives us. But He also gives us the opportunity to return. Right? God is perfect in all His traits. God is patient. Imagine, a child comes to his father and says, Dad, give me $10. You say, excuse me? What do you don't talk to me like that. I said, give me $10. Right? You know what? Why don't you go find someone else who you can talk to like that? But you're not going to talk to Dad like that. Right? Anybody here Dave, would you tolerate if your daughter spoke to you like that? Not for a second. What do you mean? Would you tolerate that? No. Absolutely not. It doesn't make any sense, right? Who talked like... Yet, we ask God, we say, God, give me life. Give me life. I better live, right? I better succeed. I better get that job. And God says, what exactly are you doing for me? I'm giving you all the success. What are you doing back for me? Right? And we say, when I win the lottery, I promise I'll give so much charity, right? And how many of those stories are true? Right? They win the lottery and they say, you know what? Instead of giving it, I'm going to invest it so that the charities will be able to benefit even more. Right? Right. We've all heard those stories. I had a guy come to me. He says to me, Rabbi, I need to meet with you right now. Right now. I need to meet with you. No problem. I drive out to Starbucks near his house. We meet. He says, I need you to give me a special blessing because I'm about to sign this big contract. And if I get this contract, I'm writing you a check for $50,000. He says, I promise. I'm writing you a check for $50,000. Now, I'll just forward in advance. Okay, I'll tell you. I never got that $50,000. He did get the deal, right? So I never even bothered to ask him because I didn't believe it when he said it. So it's not like I even accepted it as a... I didn't believe it when he said it. Yeah. But you know, it was like, why do people say that? Right? Why do people say that? And people demand from the Almighty sort of that we have good health, and I don't understand. How can God do this to me? What do you mean? We're asking for resources. Let's say please. Let's say thank you. Let's say what we're going to do with it, which is, by the way, a very good tool. If you ever want something to happen, including a business deal, I know people who do this. What you do is you add into the agreement and you write it in. I have a guy, I have actually the document here in my office, a guy who he's developed the software and he's trying to sell it to one of those big like Dell companies, a really, really big technology company. And he told me that if he sells the company, he already signed it in a contract, in a documented, right, it's documented, 1% of the company will go to the organization. Now, I don't know if he'll ever sell it. I don't know if he'll ever get a penny from it. But at least he wants to have that blessing in it because 1% won't belong to him. In any agreement he makes, 1% is charity. Immediately. So that's sort of a way to persuade the Almighty. You know, it's a good deal because, you know, I'm going to do good things with it. It's locked in already. Right? So if you want that, you know, if a person, our sages tell us that there is something called a moment of an et ratzon, a moment of desire where God says, you know what, whatever you want, no problem, you got a deal. You know, sometimes, you know, you got to negotiate something with your dad. It's like you wait for the right mood, and boom, oh, you got it, right? Because you got to wait for it. You get him in the wrong mood. You're a nice guy always, but right. But when you get them in the wrong mood, it's like forget it. Like, why are you trying? My children tell me that whenever they need something, like they really want something to happen, right? They have to ask me. Now it's not true because Zahav is so much nicer than I am, but they know how to finagle. You know, they know how to get it out of me. So, but they have to know when the right time is, right? You have to get that right, the et ratzon. You know what turns God on? Commitment. When someone makes a commitment, when someone says, you know something, I'm not going to eat that non-kosher food. When someone says, and they accept it on themselves, whatever they want they can ask for, because now God says, whoa, 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 you've done that for me? You've done that because of our relationship? What can I do for you? So it's a great tool. People like, really, I'm going to make a deal with God? Yeah, sure. You'd make a deal with your dad. You make a deal with your friend. Why wouldn't you make a deal with the Almighty? He loves you more than anybody. He's the biggest investor you've ever had, is God. He invests and invests and invests. Why? Because he believes in you more than anyone else. All right? So that is principle number 5. Number 5, that is, it is only proper to pray to God. I had someone just this week was telling me that he doesn't connect with prayer. He says, Rabbi, don't tell me to pray, okay? Because prayer means nothing to me. Right? It's just words, and I open up the prayer book and I say the words, and they mean nothing to me, and I can't connect. It's, you know, some rabbis 2,000 years ago told us what to say, and it's like, come on, get a life, Rabbi. Right? So I said to him, you're mistaken. Actually, the conversation happened in this room, and I explained that it is very important to understand that God is everywhere at all times, and as being our greatest investor. And the reason why I'm using this term investor is because today is the second day of the month of Elul. It means in 29 days we're going to be standing Rosh Hashanah in synagogue. And in 39 days we're going to be standing on Yom Kippur in synagogue singing Kol Nidrei. And we're going to ask for forgiveness. We're going to say, you know what, God, on September last year I didn't do a good job. I know I didn't. And in November, I didn't either do a good job. And in December, I did some things I shouldn't have done. Right? And we're going to say, you know what? But this year, I'm going to be better. Right? So it's like, I say, David, David, you're always the victim. You know that, right? You're the leader of Davidism. You know that religion. We spoke about that last time, right? So I say, David, listen. I have a business proposal. I show you my business plan. I say all I need is $50,000. It's a great deal. You'll be making 12%, 15% if we're lucky, but not less than 10%. That's a guarantee. Okay? So you say, you know what? I trust you. I think it's a great business plan. No problem. You give me the $50,000. When can you hear back? I say a couple months. Give it 5-6 months. You know, we'll be in business. Everything will be rolling well. Okay. 5-6 months later, David, I get that call. He says, Rabbi, what's going on with this? So, well, let me explain. Okay. You know, I needed to buy some equipment, and I needed to get a car, and my wife wanted a vacation. You know, it's really important to be healthy. You know, it's really all these things, right? But you know what? David, listen. If you invest another 50, I guarantee you it will be rolling, okay? Now, who in their right mind would say, you know what, Rabbi, go for it. I'm giving you another 50, right? Anybody? I don't think so. Right? Why? You failed the first time. Why would you succeed the second? Why would the second time be any better? So we come Rosh Hashanah to the Almighty. Almighty is our investor. And we say, you know what, Almighty? Invest in me. Give me another year. Give me another year. You know why? Because last year I was so amazing. Not. Right? Right? What do I have to say about last year? Your investment last year was well worth your time. Right? Invest in me another year. Think about the resources. Think of how much oxygen you as a human being have to breathe. How much water, how much food, how much fuel you need in your car. How much resources, millions and millions and millions of free resources, of dollars of resources God gives each and every human being. Why? Because God believes in us. God believes we're going to take those resources and give him return on his investment. And we come back at the end of the year. We say, well, last year wasn't exactly the best year, but if you invest in me another year, I promise you'll get good returns. And you know what God says? You know what? I like you. I believe in you. You'll do it next year. And we're like, okay, we want another one, right? Eventually, God will pick up on the trick. You know, it's like 30 years you've been saying the same thing over again. Next year is going to be better. Next year is going to be better. Why should God think any differently, right? Why should God continue to invest? The answer is because God really loves us and God believes in us. And God wants us. It's like that parent who says, you know what, I believe my child is going to pick up the right way. He's going to do the right thing. I'll give him another chance. I'll give him another chance. God is our greatest investor. So I told this young man, I said, talk to God. Don't open up a prayer book. Don't go to a synagogue. Talk. You're sitting in the driver's seat, literally, in your car. You're at a stop sign, you're at a red light, you're at the library, you're at the line of the bank, you're wherever you are, just talk to God. Have a conversation. Say, God, you know something? I love you. You know? Thank you for the ear. You may recall I said this story. I had a young man. I met with him at Starbucks up on Westheimer, and he says to me, life is miserable. Life is really miserable. Nothing's working for me. I haven't gone out on a date in months. No girl's gonna ever want me. Just things are just terrible. I said to him, I don't understand. Here you're sipping on an $8 latte, right? You have your paid-off car outside. Yeah. You have a home that you own, right? It's paid off. You're sitting here with a $1,300 iPad. This is right when they came out. The 10-inch one, the big one, and you're kvetching to me that life is miserable? I said, you know what you are. You are just an ingrateful person. You don't realize how good you have it. I said, please open up a note in your nifty iPad, and I want you to list off 100 things that you're grateful for. 100 things. He says, well, I don't even know. I said, let's go. You're grateful that you have life? Yes, you're grateful. Let's go. Write it. You're grateful that you can see? Are you grateful that you can hear the great music you're listening to? Are you grateful that you can smell? Are you grateful that you can walk? Are you grateful that you have a car, that you have a house? right? Last I checked, you are not walking around with a gas tank, an oxygen tank on your shoulder, right? And you don't have any catheter, right? You can go to the bathroom and you have your organs are functioning properly. Guess what? Thank Hashem for that. Put it on your list. I said, I want you to go home and I want you to do this assignment. Call me when you have 100 items that you're grateful for. You're grateful to have your parents. You're grateful to have your siblings. You're grateful to have your nephews and nieces. You're grateful to have... I want you to write all of them. It's private. It's not mine. It's yours. I helped him with the first 15 of them. I said, call me when you're done with your 100. He called me a few days later. He says, Rabbi, I have my 100. I said, great. Assignment number 2. Every morning when you wake up, you stand in front of that mirror with your iPad and you read off that list. Thank you, Hashem, for each one of those 100 things. And then tell me that your life is miserable when you're done. A few months later, he was at a torch class and met his wife. And it was a few months after that that I officiated their wedding. And it was, and God willing, they're expecting now twins. And a few weeks ago, he met with me to tell me the good news. And he says, I still have that list. Right? It's several years later, but he still has that list. So it's, you know what?
You should have made more.
That's prayer too. Prayer is giving thanks. All prayer is saying thank you, thank you, thank you, because thank you acknowledges a relationship. If someone has an appreciation, it's a bond between them and the other person. So when God gives us good and we acknowledge that good, guess what? We're building. That's prayer. All of prayer, all of our lives, the reason why Adam and Eve were thrown out of the Garden of Eden was because they didn't have proper appreciation. Our tikkun, our repair, is having that appreciation. And it's amazing to see the appreciation that children don't have, that they begin to understand when they become parents. Right? When children become parents, and I made that phone call to my mom, and I look forward to the day my children call me, and they tell me, you had to put up with the what?
Yeah.
Right? This is the most amazing thing. I never knew. I never realized. I always took it for granted. Right? I never realized that, you just throw your dirty laundry in the hamper and boom, it's clean in the drawer. How does that happen? Right? And you just come home and there's food waiting for you. Right? And when you have your own home and you're your own parent, and you see, 1 second, my children don't even understand where this comes from. Right? And you pick up that phone call and you say, you know what? Abba, Ima, Daddy, Mommy, thank you. Right? It builds a bond. It builds. What we're saying to God is thank you. That's our goal, is to be in a relationship of complete recognition that everything we have is from the Almighty and acknowledging it and thanking God. That's all prayer is. Now, you can also ask things. You can ask and say, you know what, Hashem, thank you for everything you give me. I just need a little help. I need to close that deal. I need that job. I'm trying to find a soulmate, or I know somebody who needs healing. I know somebody who needs a soulmate. That's what prayer is. People make out of prayer like, oh, I'm going to go to synagogue now. Now it's going to be 2 hours of going like this. Right? And we're going to go like, oh my goodness, when is this done? Oh, done yet? Right? That's not prayer. That's not prayer. That's ceremony, that's service, that's many different things, but it's not prayer. Prayer is when we talk to God. Okay? Number 6, I believe with perfect faith that all the words of the prophets are true. If the words of the prophets are true, then we have nothing in Judaism. Because we have no Torah, we have no commandments, and as we'll see when we talk about principle number 13 today, you'll see a lot about it because the prophets talk a lot about the resurrection of the dead. I believe with perfect faith, number 7, that the prophecy of Moses is absolutely true. Oh, so 1 second. In number 6, we said all the words of the prophets are true. And as you recall, we discussed that when we say all the words of the prophets are true, what does it mean?
Oh, 100%.
100% of what they say. If they say, right? They say all of these circumstances, all these miracles are going to happen. You're going to be at Galveston, and suddenly there's going to be an earthquake, and out of that earthquake is going to come a dolphin, and they give you the whole story, and then it's going to rain, and then the earth is going to come together, and I'm going to walk on water, all of these things, okay? So they say 100 different miracles that are going to happen at once, and guess what? Everything happens except for one. There's no dolphin jumping through. You know what? They're a false prophet. Because in order for someone to be a true prophet, according to the Torah's conditions, all their words needs to be true. Everything they say. Okay, so if one fact is left out, or one fact is not accurate, out. Send him. Tell him it's nice meeting you. You may be a good guy, but a prophet you're not. Okay? You're a non-for-profit. Right? So, number 7, I believe with perfect faith that the prophecy of Moses is absolutely true. Okay? That's the Torah that we have. The Torah that we have was written by Moses through the word of Hashem. He was the chief of all prophets before and after him. Number 8, I believe with perfect faith that the entire Torah that we now have is that which was given to Moses, meaning it's not a new Torah. It's not a different Torah. There's no New Testament, right? There's no other books that, these are the books that were given to us by Moses. That we discussed, when we discussed principle number 8, we've mentioned some of the proofs of that. In that, for example, typically an author of a book wouldn't write their own mistakes. They wouldn't write their own sins. Certainly not of their people or of the flaws of leadership. I guarantee you, I have a book by many public figures. They write about themselves after they leave office. They write about leadership. They write about decisions. They write about many different things that they had that emphasize their terms in office. And they usually they'll spend a quarter of a chapter talking allegedly. People say I made a mistake. Right? And they're covering up for that mistake. But they're not writing outright their mistakes and their flaws. Here, you have a book which says Moshe stuttered. Right? Moshe was not exactly the most articulate individual. Right? He was not exactly someone who was a charismatic personality. He was not, right? What are the qualifications for him to be a leader? Well, God chose him. Why did God choose him? Because he cared. He felt the pain of his people. That was the only qualification. It was the only qualification. God chose him and he cared. That's it. It says in the Torah, we mentioned this morning, that because we're talking about the trait of humility, it says that Moses was the most humble of all men. Right? Now imagine we have an argument who's more humble, right? Usually what that connotes is that, well, I'm more arrogant than you, that I think that I'm more humble, right?
Yep.
Moses is the most humble of all men. Right? What does that mean? And why would it be written in the Torah? Moses, if he was so humble, would never write it. Well, he doesn't have the right to choose what gets put in the Torah and what doesn't. But it also helps us understand what true humility is. Humility is the understanding that everything you have is a gift from the Almighty. The minute you start taking credit for things you did not earn, for things that are a gift, you have a special talent. Someone with a great voice. Imagine Pavarotti, right? Pavarotti starts, boasting about, hey, my voice is a heck of a lot better than yours, right? Why? Because I'm Pavarotti and you're not. Right? That's a little boastful. It's a little arrogant. It's not a... Well, what would be the right way? Well, something? I really didn't do anything for this voice. God gave me a gift, and I'm trying to not waste it. So I'm going to do the best I can, right, to utilize this great gift. But I'm not any better than you. You're just as good as me. Right? God gave me certain talent and certain skill. Right? That's a very different approach. Moses wasn't saying, I'm so great. But what humility is recognizing where you stand. And Moses recognized he realized how close he was to God. The closer you are to the sun, the more insignificant you realize you are. So when you're you ever see an airplane? You look up, you see a little airplane, you're like, wow, that's such a little toy, right? And then when you get closer to the airplane, you're like, oh my goodness, this thing is it's the size of a city, right? You ever see one of those A380s, right? You see those, the double deckers, Airbus? Woo! That thing is enormous. It's like the size of the whole airport, right? That thing is really, it's an amazing, when you look at it from so far away, it looks like this little speck in the sky. It's nothing. The closer we are to God, the more insignificant we realize how fragile we are. It's not that we're insignificant. We can do amazing things. We have great powers, but they're all a gift from God. Without God, we're nothing. Moses was more humble than any man because he was closer to God than any other man. He was closer to that, let's give the example of that Boeing, right, or of that Airbus. He was closer to it than anybody else. He realized how small he was. Yes, he was more humble because he was closer to God. All of us are so far away, we're like, oh, well, I'm pretty big. It's also big, but I'm bigger, because from the distance it looks like it's so small. There's a story that's told. There's actually a song sung by a great composer. His name is A.B. Rottenberg, and it's called Little Kite. It's one of the most magnificent songs. Magnificent songs. I love this song. It's one of my favorites. And it's this young man takes a kite and a spool of it's with clear line, and he takes the kite out. And the kite starts soaring, and he's having a conversation with this kite. And he's talking to the kite. He says, you could see the mountains, you can see the valleys, you can see everything. But tell me, do you see a God in heaven? Is there any God up there? Right? All right. And he keeps on having this conversation. Right? He says, finally, one day, while he's standing there with the kite, an older man walks over to him and says to him, hey, what are you doing? He says, what do you mean, what am I doing? He says, I'm flying a kite. So the guy looks up, he says, there's no kite. Right? So how's he going to prove to him that there's a kite? He says, I feel him pulling the string. Right? I feel the kite pulling the string that's in my hand. That's how I know the kite is there. Right? You feel that force, you feel the tugging of the string. He says, now I understand. I can't see God, but I feel him pulling the strings in my hand. Right? God is constantly pulling those strings. It's a really powerful message. Right? You can't see the kite. It's so far up. It's in the heavens. But you know that it's there because you can feel the tug. Right? The Almighty's there. The closer we are, the greater we can recognize God's greatness. We can see how this is awesome. All right. We're up to number 9. I believe with perfect faith that the Torah will not be changed and that there will never be another Torah given by God. All right? There's not going to be any exchange. There's not going to be any return. God's going to say, you know what? I have a couple of edits. All right, let me just change a few things and then I'll give it back to you. If it's a perfect document, which we believe it is, it's a perfect document, which is why we spend a lot of time in our Talmud class, the Talmud lunch learn at 12 o'clock every Friday, right? Dissecting every word of the Torah through the eyes of the Talmud. That's what the Talmud does. He investigates every word. If our idea is that every word of the Torah is real and true, then we can interrogate and we can ask and we can verify every idea in the Torah. And that's what we try to do through the study of Talmud. Number 10, I believe with perfect faith that God knows all of man's deeds and thoughts. It is thus written, He has molded every heart together. He understands what each one does. So God, right, and we discussed how this little lens here in this camera, right, we have people from all over the country and from all over the world. I see a friend from England here. I see someone here from Spring, Texas. I see from New York, right? People from all over the world can see what's going on here in Houston, Texas at the Torch Center right now and hear the voice from what? From a piece of plastic sitting in front of me. Now tell me, you think if we human beings can discover such technology, you think God, creator of heaven and earth, can't figure out how to see things on the other side of the world, how to hear our private conversations, how to NSA 101, right? God's got everything covered, right? God hears and God sees, right? And that's here we go. Howdy from Austin. Thank you. Right? So we have such power. Why do we have such power? Right? In our hands, we could be sitting here and having a video chat with our grandchildren, right? In Atlanta, in Colorado, right? Wherever they are. From what? From a little piece of plastic that's looking at us. Hayotzer ayin. If God creates an eye, can God not see? If God creates an ear, can God not hear? If God creates a mouth, can God, right? God doesn't know our thoughts. And this is what we say in our prayers. Right? Recognizing God is in control of everything. God's in control of everything. He knows everything that we do. It ought to put a little chill in our right? In our bone that God knows what's going on. And God knows your worries too, by the way. God knows you need that deal. You need to get that job. You need to find your soulmate. God knows your worries. I want you to talk to him. You know, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, Leah, the 4 matriarchs of the Jewish people were all barren. They were not able to have children. Our sages tell us, you know why? They were perfectly good women. They were righteous women. So why did God have to create them with that limitation? Sages tell us because God wanted their prayers. God said, please, I want to hear it. It's like you have that child who wants that lollipop, but the way they say, please, right? So you see, say it again. Say it one more time, all right? Daddy wants to hear one more time. Say please, and then you give them the candy. Why? It's abusive. Just give them the candy. No, I want to hear it, right? I want to hear it again. God says, I want to hear the prayer. I want to hear it. It says it about Hannah, right? That's about negotiating, by the way, right? Hannah. The Talmud tells us, we learned this Talmud together in Talmud Lunch Learn, right? Hannah, we learned from Hannah how to pray. She had negotiated with God. Boy, she negotiated. The Talmud says, she said to the Almighty, there's nothing that you create in your world that's in vain. There's nothing that you created in vain. She said, you gave me the ability as a woman to feed a child. And you don't give me a child? So you created it in vain. So give me a child. And God gave her a child. Right? You wouldn't create anything in vain. So we can negotiate with God. We should negotiate with God because it means we're in a relationship. Right? I can't walk over to a perfect stranger and start negotiating a deal. He says, excuse me, who are you? What's your name? I don't do. We have to talk to the Almighty. We build that relationship, and the closer we are to God, the closer He is to us. Number 11, I believe with perfect faith that God rewards those who keep His commandments and punishes those who transgress His commandments. His reward and punishment is a very basic principle. We understand that as adults, mature adults, hopefully, right? The world we live in today, we don't know how much people understand this concept of reward and punishment. Right? Today, anything is possible. I mean, people don't have repercussions for anything, right? So you can crash into someone's car and say, "Well, I was having a bad day." All right, we'll let you off the hook, right? It's craziness, the things that goes on today. Especially, we have this participation trophy, right? Anyone familiar with that? Mm-hmm. I've seen that. My son went to a soccer league, and he was at the championship, and he lost. I'm like, okay, let's get in the car. Let's go home. You lost the game. I'm sorry. Give him a hug. You'll do better next time. No. He shouldn't go yet. Right, the coach says he shouldn't go yet. We're giving out trophies. I'm like, he lost. Yeah. He lost, right? No. He's getting a trophy anyway because we don't want only the winners to, It's like, I'm like, that's it. You're never going back to that league. Because if you come out with a trophy after you lost, you're never going to feel bad that you lost. You'll never try harder. Because everyone gets a trophy at the end. Well, that's not reward and punishment. When you lose, it should hurt. Right? When we get punishment, it's God telling us, I want you to change something. Something's got to change. All right? So it's a very fundamental principle. It's common sense, but sadly, most of the world doesn't understand it. I believe with perfect faith is number 12. In the coming of the Messiah, no matter how long it takes, I will await his coming every day. This is number 12. We discussed this last week. The importance, last 2 weeks, of understanding the principle of the Messiah. And now we get to today's principle. So for those of you who came an hour ago, 50 minutes ago, to hear about this, you had to hear the whole introduction. We're continuing for another 50 minutes. Guess what? So, number 13 is as follows. I believe with perfect faith that the dead will be brought back to life when God wills it to happen. Okay? This is a very, very important principle. It's not a very long one, but it's very fundamental. And that is, well, you know what? I'll read through here through the sources, okay? Commentary in the Mishnah, the Rambam tells us, okay? So first is in Yigdal, the Song of Yigdal complements the 13 principles of faith. In the following stanza, the final stanza of Yigdal says as follows. God will bring the dead to life with his great love. May his glorious name be blessed for all time. The commentary on the Mishnah of Maimonides writes Maimonides' commentary on the Mishnah is as follows. The 13 principles involves the resurrection of the dead. The 13th principle involves the resurrection of the dead. The resurrection of the dead is one of the foundations handed down by Moses. Okay, so now, many of the things that we know today as true, as factual in Judaism, we don't have any written source for it in the Torah. For example, if I were to walk, and we given this example before, right? I walk into synagogue with pink tefillin, right? So I'm wearing these pink boxes on my head, and you come over to me and say, "Sir, you know, tefillin is supposed to be black." I'm like, "Yo, you know, real men wear pink, right?" And you say, "Well, yeah, but tefillin is got to be black." And I say, "Fine, so show me in the Torah where it says it should be black." And you won't be able to find anywhere in the Torah that it says that tefillin need to be black. Right? That's a mitzvah that was handed down by Moses, that it should be black. And we all know, without any question, that tefillin are black. They're not brown, and they're not blue, and they're not gray, and they're not any other shade or color. They're black, and only black. Where do we know that from? From Moses. Moses explained all of the Torah, all of the mitzvahs, all of the how-tos of each commandment at Mount Sinai. And one of them was that the tefillin that's commanded to us to wear every single day should be black. That's one of the Moses, it's a halacha from Moses at Sinai. Okay. The resurrection now, it also says that the belief in the resurrection of the dead is the full association that one has with Judaism. You can't believe in Judaism and say, "Yeah, but I don't believe in the resurrection of the dead." It's a fundamental, again, it's the 13th, the highest level of our principles of faith is the belief in the resurrection of the dead. Now let's understand something here. The resurrection, however, is just for the righteous. The Midrash says in Bereshis Rabbah, "Rain is for both wicked and righteous, but the resurrection is only for the righteous. It would be absurd for the wicked to be brought back to life, for even when they are alive, they are considered dead." Our sages teach us the wicked are considered dead even during their lifetimes, but the righteous are considered alive even in their death. That's why many people don't, they're sad that their leaders, their spiritual leaders, their Rabbis, their masters pass away, but in a way they're not so sad, because even when they're dead, they're alive. And we see many times the righteous people, their writings and all of their wisdom came to the light of the world only after they passed away. People didn't even know how great they were when they were alive. Turns out when they passed away, they became much greater. Think of Rambam for a second. Rambam himself, when he was alive, not everyone appreciated the Rambam. Not everyone thought he was the holy Moses. He was Moses, right? But not everyone thought that he was like. But when he passed today, there's no one who doubts the greatness of Rambam, of Maimonides. Okay. Okay, so the Rambam in the laws of Teshuvah, repentance, says that these have no portion of the world to come, and it's those who deny the resurrection of the dead. Okay, now, the concept of the resurrection is well known among all Jews, and there are none who dispute it. It is mentioned many times in our prayers and homilies, as well as in supplications written by the prophets and sages. Innumerable reference to it may be found in the Talmud and Midrash. Right? It is, right? This is its significance. He says like this: the body and the soul will be reunited once again after they have been separated by death. So the body and soul right now, we're all living, thank God. Please, nobody collapse here, okay? Right? I want you to live and be well for many, many more years in good health. Right now, the reason why you're alive is because your body and soul are united as one. When a person passes away, it's the soul that departs the body. Now the body has no more function. It's sort of like the Energizer bunny. It's the battery, right? If you take away the battery, it's not going to work. It may be a good clock, but you took out the battery, it's not going to work anymore, right? The battery that keeps us going is our neshama, our soul, right? So when the soul and the body separate, that's when we die. Okay? So death means the separation of body and soul. There is no... for we must understand... Okay, also it's like this. There is no Jew who disputes this, and it cannot be interpreted other than literally. So we know that many things we say, well, it's allegorical, it's a parable, it's trying to teach you something, so it's more of a metaphor, right? Over here, when we talk about the resurrection of the dead, it's very literal, right? There is not much allegory when it comes to talking about the resurrection. For we must understand that even though many other biblical verses may be interpreted allegorically, this must be taken literally. The concept of the resurrection, namely that body and soul will be reunited after death, is found in the book of Daniel in such a manner that it cannot be interpreted other than literally. We are told in Daniel 12, chapter 12, verse 2, many who sleep in the dust shall awaken, some to everlasting life, and some to everlasting shame and reproach. Daniel was likewise told by the angel, now go your way to the end and rest, and you shall arise to your destiny at the end of days. Right? This is very clear from the words of our sages, exactly what they're referring to, that there's going to be a day where we're resurrected. I'm going to get into greater details in a minute. We also see from many pertinent teachings that the men whose souls have been returned to their bodies will eat, this is at the time of resurrection, will eat, drink, marry, have children, and finally die after living a very long time. Yes?
This is what's perplexing to me still. Maybe you can or can't answer it.
Mm-hmm.
What body goes to which soul? Since we
So I told you.
I can't. You don't know. Nobody knows.
I told you. The soul will have to pick the best looking body.
Well, you know they recycle. There's only a finite amount of souls, and you got.
All right. So I think it's the soul. Okay, because we're talking about there's something called reincarnation, right, which comes before the resurrection, where if someone needs to make a perfection for their soul, to get it to its perfect state, it's got to be sent back. And it comes back, and I think it's the body that brings it to its perfection.
Do you?
Yeah.
Oh, could be the first. Then it's got to be.
Well, it's not the first, probably the last. Okay, so it says like this. I got this book in the mail last week. It's a fantastic book by Rabbi Lawrence Hagioff. It's called The Future, and I want to thank I got a letter in the mail from Asher David Milstein, who I think is it's over here. It says that it's dedicated to the honor of his marriage, but I think I don't know exactly his relationship here, but maybe he sponsored this book. But either way, it's a phenomenal book. I got a free copy of it, and I said, you know what, I will open it up and see what there is. Guess what? There's a chapter about the resurrection. So I went through it. And here's what it says. The Rambam listed the 13 principles of faith that every Jew must know and believe in. These principles are foundations in Judaism and are the underpinnings for everything we believe as a nation. So you want to know what the Jewish people believe in? It's these 13 principles. The majority of this book has been about principle 12, which describes our belief in the coming of Mashiach. However, the last on the list, principle number 13, is important to understand as well, and the fact that it follows immediately after the belief in the Mashiach means that it does have some interplay and overlap with the arrival of the Mashiach. Principle number 13 reads, he goes through that we believe with complete faith, that there will be a resurrection of the dead whenever the Creator wills it. What is the Rambam talking about? What is the resurrection about? And who is to be resurrected? See, it goes in as follows. After the Messianic period comes to a close, a new and more incredible world will open up, referred to as Olam Haba, the world to come, the next world. This time period will begin after the resurrection of the dead. While the prophets spoke at great length and detail of the Messianic era, very little was spoken about the resurrection and the nature of the world that follows it. The Rambam writes about this and says, a human being does not have the capacity to properly comprehend the goodness of the world to come. No one knows its glory, beauty, and potency except for God himself. All the benefits that the prophets predicted for Israel are only physical matters that the Jewish people will enjoy in the Messianic era. Their sovereignty is restored. So when all the nations recognize that the Jewish people are God's people, and they stop messing with us, and they stop persecuting us, and they stop having all these terrible decrees against the Jewish people, right? That's going to be the time of Messiah. They're going to have absolute respect for the Jewish people, and we will live in peace in the world. The goodness of the life of the world to come is immeasurable and utterly beyond comparison. The prophets do not describe it by means of analogy, lest they cheapen it by doing so. So if they say, you know what, the world to come is like, right, there's no comparison. So what are you going to, it's like what? They say that the pleasure of the world to come is if you take all of the pleasures of this world, all of the pleasures. Imagine, there are how many billions of people in the world? You take all of their pleasures of all of their lifetime, and you combine them all into one pleasure, it doesn't equal 1 millisecond of the world to come. Right? It's greater than that. So it's pretty serious, right? This is just as Yeshaya HaNavi, right? Isaiah said about the world to come, no eye except yours, O God, has seen. No one can fathom, no one can imagine how great this is. Having said this, we are actually given a little information about this period, mostly through metaphor and analogy. So let's look at what the prophets and sages have to say about this. I don't know how everyone's doing with time. I can go a little bit longer, right? Sure, yeah. So it's just so we can get some understanding. When a person dies, his soul goes to the world of souls, right? The world of souls. This place is referred to as Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden, right? Is non-physical and totally spiritual reality where the souls of the righteous exist in a place of profound spiritual light through the proximity of God. Their proximity of God. So the closer they got to God in this world is the closeness they'll have in the next world. Being in a physical body for the duration of a person's life on earth, the soul never experienced such closeness to pure spirituality as physicality acted as a barrier. So we know, we say this many times in different formats, but when a baby comes to this world, what's the first thing it does? It cries. Why does it cry? Because it doesn't want to be here. Right? Here the soul was in a world close to God. It's so connected. It's like it's in a perfect existence, in a perfect state. And now you're taking this lofty soul that is it's limitless and boundless, and you're shrinking it into the physical body, into this little rib cage, right? It's locked in a prison. Right? It doesn't want to be there. Why? Here's this spiritual body. Imagine like a helium balloon inside this physical body. It just wants to get out. It just wants to do great things. It wants to be closer to God. It wants to do all of these things. What do? We tell the baby, oh, here's some Paw Patrol, here's some cars, here's some dolls, right? Here's some toys, here are balloons, right? We distract the child. Don't worry about your soul. Don't worry about the spirituality that it's seeking. Just take these physical things. Just take these things. And then later on he says, you know what, I can make some money, I can do some good things, I can enjoy the world, I can do this and do that. And we forget all about the spiritual urges and desires that the soul has. Soul, he says, bring me back to that place. I don't want to be locked up here in this physical world, running after materialism. I want to be running after spirituality. So the physicality of this world acts as a barrier for that soul to connect on a higher level. However, once the body dies, the soul becomes free to experience the spiritual world in a way it never did while residing on earth. All of this takes place in the non-physical realm. Okay, so now the body is out of the way. The soul, he loves the state of non-physical. Right? It's great for the soul because he wants to be back at home. The Mashiach will come to Olam Hazeh. Mashiach will come to this present world and redeem the world, bringing the much sought after peace we have all been waiting and praying for all these years. But what of the souls of the righteous who have passed and were not present during the Messianic redemption? Do they not get to partake in the final part of the world history? They worked as much as their descendants in laying the foundation for the Mashiach's arrival. Don't they get to be part of the process? The answer is yes, but not in the way you would expect. The souls remain in the world of souls until the final judgment that ushers in the period called Tchiyat HaMetim, the resurrection of the dead, and the world to come. Unlike the world of souls, which is a holding station of sorts for the souls that departed this world for the duration of the world history, both the resurrection of the dead and the world to come will take place in the physical world after the Mashiach has revealed himself and peace has reigned over the entire world. So there's a process that happens here, right? Now, over here, he goes into the three different phases of judgment. Every person is judged, and the Ramban says that we're judged by a heavenly tribunal at three stages of our existence, right? The first is every Rosh Hashanah. Every Rosh Hashanah, a person's material fortunes are decided according to their deeds during the their deeds during the preceding year. It's on Rosh Hashanah that every soul in the world goes through this accounting and is scrutinized as to its worth and accomplishments from the previous year. Based on this accounting, like we mentioned earlier, right, the decision is made on the material success for that person during the upcoming year, how much money they will acquire, if they are to be married, how many children they will be given, and all the challenges that they will need to face in order to achieve their potential. So all of that is judged on Rosh Hashanah. That's in 29 days from now. Okay? We're going to be judged. Every single one of us individually are going to be standing in front of that heavenly tribunal where we're going to be given that accounting. Right? And if we showed that we were a good investment, which hopefully you all are, and we all are, right? So, I count myself among you righteous people, right? That hopefully, right, will merit to another fantastic year because, God's going to say, last year was pretty good. We'll give you one more, right? My grandfather, I mentioned this previously in a different class, that my grandfather, if people would ask him at this time of the year about something that would happen after Rosh Hashanah, can you attend this event? Can you come to a wedding? Whatever it was, he would always say, well, if God gives me life, I'll have to see after Rosh Hashanah. If God decides after Rosh Hashanah, and not taking it for granted that we're going to have another life after Rosh Hashanah. God might say, Rosh Hashanah, you know what? Hasta la vista, you've done your job, goodbye. right? You're done. Right? It was nice having you here. Now it's time to come to the world of souls. We're like, it's terrifying. We have still work to do. We got things we got to do. Okay, so that's the first judgment is on Rosh Hashanah. At death is the second judgment. The soul of every person is judged on the decision, and the decision is made whether to go straight to the world of souls or whether to go to Gehinnom, which is a short cleansing period before they are permitted to enter into the world of souls. So every soul goes through, and the Talmud relates the exact questions that are asked when we get to that world of ultimate judgment, where God says, okay, what did you do for me in the world that you were in down there? I gave you all these resources. I gave you great parents. I gave you great children. I gave you great resources. What did you do with those resources? Did you do what I wanted you to do with them? I sent you there on a mission. Did you fulfill that mission as we agreed upon? And if the person didn't, so there's several options. If the person did what they were supposed to do, go to the world of souls. Go, right? You're going to that holding room, waiting for a holding world, right? But if not, there are a couple of options. Either the person can come back, like we said, reincarnation, or the person can have a slight cleanse, right? Some people call it purgatory, right? That's what the Christians use to scare the living daylights out of you, so you accept their Lord and Savior, or else, right? So they say either that or eternal damnation. Which would you pick? I don't know, right? Those are the options you're giving me, right? But right? But in Judaism we don't believe in that, right? At all. Instead, you know what? The kid falls into the mud. You say, you're not walking in the house with the mud. Right? Stand over there. I'm going to pull out the hose. I'm going to spray you down. And you know what? That hose is a very powerful pressure, right? And it stings and it hurts and it's not so pleasant. But you know what? You're not coming in the house in that mud. God's palace. He says, listen, I want pristineness in my abode. Right? We come tarnished with sins, we come with these impurities. God says it needs to be polished first. You need to be cleaned, right? You go put you in the oven, get baked a little better, right? And then you can come in here, right? And it's not a permanent state, but rather a very temporary state. And what we say is that the righteous, that's why Kaddish, after someone passes away, is set 11 months. Because it says the righteous, up to 11 months is their time of cleansing. The non-righteous, it's full 12 months. Right? So we assume that those who are deceased are righteous, which is why we say Kaddish for 12 months. Well, for 11 months, I'm sorry. Now it's interesting, my grandfather in his will, you can imagine, what did he write? He says, I'm such a sinner, and I'm so not worthy, I'm asking for my children to say Kaddish for me for a full 12 months, because I really I'm not among the righteous. That's what he wrote in his will. And my father went to a great sage, Rabbi Yashiv, to ask him, should he fulfill the request of my grandfather to say the Kaddish for 12 months, right? Or not, because it would be sort of shameful. Imagine someone says, 1 second, it's 11 months and 15 days, you're still saying Kaddish? You think your father was such an evil person? Right? So the rabbi said that anybody who knew how great he was would also know that this was his request, right? And he wasn't the only. There are many, many of the righteous who made this intentional request because they felt that they really weren't worthy. They felt that they really weren't that holy and deserving of only an 11-month Kaddish. It's a very special thing. So that's the second judgment. And then the third judgment is at Yom Hadin, the great day of judgment. All people are judged to determine whether they are worthy of resurrection. Even though every person was already judged when they died, this new judgment adds another element that could not be judged when they passed: the long-term consequences of the actions after their sojourn on earth. Right? So imagine this. As an example, Moshe's influence is felt to this very day. So his final judgment on the great day of judgment will include his effect on subsequent generations in addition to his actions when he was living. This is true for the rest of us as well. The final judgment takes into account the sum total of every person's accomplishments and influence up to the last day of history. So imagine this. Imagine that someone, the day they die, okay, they leave in their will, I want to dedicate all of this money to go to this great institution. All of my money I want it to go, or a lot of it, right? So now, when they died, they go to judgment. The God says, what did you do till now? Right? Till this moment. It looks all the way back on their whole life. What did they accomplish? But when we have the day of ultimate judgment, God says, 1 second. Right, you founded this institution, you founded that, and you bought them that building so they can teach all that Torah and do those good acts of kindness and all those other great things. Right? That's millions and millions of merits that weren't counted at the moment of death. Because they were, the results of... Right, but it's not only that. Imagine, they say that there was once a man, an old, righteous Jew, a Jerusalemite, long white beard with a long payas. He's standing at the Western Wall and he's crying and crying and crying. Eventually he passes away. And they come to him, they say to him, look what you've done. You've done the most amazing thing. Look, you have all of these children and grandchildren. He says, no, those aren't my children. What are you talking about? Those are not my grandchildren either. He says, you don't understand. When you were crying at that Western Wall, there was a backpacker there who was traveling around Europe. He came to Israel, a Jewish boy. And he was so inspired by your prayer at the wall, he decided he needs to learn more about Judaism. So he went to go study in yeshiva. He eventually became religious and married a Jewish woman, had children. He says, those are your children. You inspired him. He says, but I didn't even know the guy. I never said hello to him. Well, that's the interest we get. Right? We only know the principle. We know what we actually put in. At the time of our death, this is what our total is. But the sum total is at the end of time that tracks all of the results, all of the great. So it's having a good investment in business is one thing. Having a good investment in the world to come is an even better thing. I'll share with you. It's an amazing story that happened to me. It was very, very humbling. But I remember when I was in yeshiva 25 years ago. I was learning in yeshiva and I was pretty ignorant. And I started learning halacha. I started learning, basic Jewish law. I was 15 years old. And in halacha it says that when people eat together, when 3 people eat together, if they don't share a word of Torah, it's as if they've eaten from a corpse, right? It's like, so I'm like, okay, something's got to change here. So I remember I said to the guy sitting on my table, we had assigned seats in yeshiva. The same 6 guys sat at the same table the entire year. So I got to know these guys pretty well. And I said, I just learned this law in our halacha. And, it seems like we have to share a little thought of Torah. And they're like, well, we came here to eat. We didn't come here to learn. We learn upstairs. So they gave me those same hardships that you can imagine. And I said, let me just share a short thought if you don't want to, And I started writing. I had a little booklet. And I started writing every day a short halacha that I would share. And then after I shared the halacha, it usually sprung into some conversation about it. And then one time we had this conversation. The next table over said, why don't you share your halacha with us too? So I went to that table. And I started sharing so it became sort of like a halacha a day at each one of the meals in the entire yeshiva. Right? So I'd go around from table to table to table sharing the thought of the halacha. And it would be morning, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. If I wasn't there, I would have someone else do it for me. I would write the halachas in advance in this little notebook. And sure enough, I went to Israel a few years ago. And behold, my nephew is learning in that same yeshiva. So I said to him, tell me, what do you guys do during lunch? It's like, I was like just... He said, Well, someone goes around and says a halacha. That's the custom we have in our yeshiva. I was like, wow, it's the most awesome thing that for 25 years this has been the custom. I hope I can go like into heaven and God will say, you know what, you're like the big kahuna, it's like, but you know what? Sometimes we do something so small and it has such an impact that for generations, hopefully, right? We never know what it is that can do it, and usually we won't ever know what it is. But we can invest in something which is spiritually smart, and it lives along forever. I'll tell you, there's a man. His name is Joe Tenenbaum. Joe and Faye Tenenbaum from Toronto, Canada. And if you go to Israel, it's very rare that you'll find any building of any institution that doesn't have his name on it. All over Jerusalem, the Joe and Faye Tenenbaum building, all over the place. He built buildings for all the institutions. And he said, I want my children and my grandchildren, if they ever turn away from Judaism, they come to Jerusalem, right? Because that's the center of all Judaism. They'll always be able to know that this is what I invested in. I invested in what's really important for the Jewish people. I invested in the Jewish future. Go back to your heritage. Go back. This is what's really important. Not all that money that he made. He was a very, very affluent man. But I think he made his money on building the 401, the big highways over there from like Niagara Falls to Toronto, and then Toronto to Montreal. I don't know where he made his money from, but either way, but he wanted it to be a legacy for his family to know what is really important. Beyond all of that, what's the right thing to invest in? And the best thing to invest in is our world to come, which is why ultimately, this is the highest, this is the 13th level of the principles of faith, is because, yes, we need to have faith. Yes, we need to know who to pray to. We have to know that the Torah is true and all of that. But this is that one inspiration, that one seed that we can plant in any area of life that continues to grow and to grow and to grow. Imagine if you owned that apple. Not the computers and phones, right? I'm talking about the first apple. And you had that seed that is all the future apples that will ever be planted and all the future apples that will ever grow. Like, wow, the great, 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 great grandchildren of that little seed. That's every mitzvah that we invest in. Yes?
Just a quick question. Let's go back to your grandfather again. Why would he worry about 11 or 12 months? Wouldn't he go to the world of souls anyway? He would not get power wash.
He felt that he wasn't worthy. He felt that he was my grandfather legitimately, as a humble person that he was, legitimately felt that he was not worthy of the ear he was given by the Almighty. He felt that he needed to do more with his resources, he needed to do more with his talents, and that God would hold him accountable. Imagine if God gave you a great skill of writing. You can write these great philosophical books, and you can be like the next Einstein. Okay, imagine, or the next Darwin, right? And instead, it's just I'm just me. Just leave me alone. I just want to make a living, right? What do you mean? God gave you these skills and you didn't utilize them, right? Right? Mm-hmm. That's what my grandfather felt. He says, you know what? I could have accomplished so much more and I didn't. Hashem is going to hold me accountable. You guys better believe I need those 12 months. That's it. He really felt that. Not, I'm going to play holy. Let them think, after I passed away that I was like some righteous guy. I was like, no. He wasn't trying to fool me. He legitimately felt that he needed the extra, blessings of that Kaddish for one more month. No, he wasn't just being, like, holier than thou.
Would he go to the power wash?
I don't know. I wasn't there. I wasn't there.
Didn't you make a comment that the righteous?
Yeah, but yes, absolutely, that the righteous. But who's righteous?
Well, nobody's righteous.
We don't know. We don't have the barometer to know, right? Just because someone looks a certain way doesn't mean they are a certain way. My father always said the following principle. He said, "Not everyone with a kippah is Jewish, and not everyone without a kippah isn't." Yeah, that's right. Right? So you could see someone with this big yarmulke, and guess what? He's a Jews for J, or he's a Christians for J, and he's he's like, he has this big yarmulke. Looks like he's a rabbi, from Jerusalem. But you know what? It doesn't mean anything. You can have someone who doesn't wear a kippah. It doesn't mean anything either. It doesn't mean that they're not a wholly righteous person. You can't judge a book by its cover. Now, I do think my grandfather was a very, very righteous person, but he didn't feel that about himself. He didn't feel like he had anything that was a slam dunk. Oh, I know I'm for sure getting to heaven. I got it in the bank. No, you know what? He was very serious about there's an accountability. Any other questions? Yes.
He didn't want to have that arrogance, because if he thought that he was righteous enough to merit only 11 months, then that would have been a little bit of arrogance, right? I mean, he would making a little bit of an assumption about himself that maybe he should.
Potentially, yeah. That's
I mean,
look,
he maybe felt that way.
The world to come is a world of truth. So we can fool everybody in this world. In the world to come, it's black and white. There's no gray area. We spoke about this on Friday in the Parsha Minute, right, online. There's no gray area. God says, I've given you blessing, I've given you curse, I've given you good, I've given you bad, I've given you life, I've given you death. Right? Pick. Which one do you want? Well, I want something in between. There's no in between. Right?
Yeah.
Right? I gave you life and I gave you good. Or I gave you death and bad. Right? It's one of those two. Right? And we've been in this culture. It's like, you can't afford the Bentley, no problem. Make the payments. You can be in debt. It's like we have this gray area. I can't, but I'll do it anyway. That's not, that's not the world of truth. The world of truth is absolute truth. There's no beating around the bush. My dear friends, it's been an absolute pleasure to have this journey together of these 13 principles of faith. And next week we're going to continue with Mussar Mondays. But August 25th, which is August 25th? Is that a Monday? August 20 something. August 27th. August 27th, we have a new series that's beginning. It's a 2-week series, which is Don't Play Solo. And that is Don't Play Solo. And that is a special class preparing us for the Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So it's going to be the 27th and the 3rd. It's Labor Day, but I know that nobody works on Labor Day, right? So we have the class anyway at 7:30. We're going to be live on Facebook as well.
Is there a Monday class next week?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Torah never stops.
He just said those.
Right. Next week we have a class. It's not going to be on either of those this top. Maybe we'll do a summary of the 13. We'll see. We have plenty to talk about otherwise. We're going to do the 27th and the 3rd is going to be high holiday prep, and I look forward to preparing with everyone for the high holidays. Don't forget to like, share, and comment on these videos. I appreciate it very much. But we want to get Torah out there to the masses and hopefully inspire the rest of the world that the resurrection is coming. Right? Right? They're going to start a new movement now, right? No, it's pure Judaism. That's it. But people don't. Nobody wants to think about it. Thank you to our dear friends online. Thank you for joining us. It's much more fun live in the class. Hopefully, you can ask questions and so on and so forth. But thank you for joining us. Have a lovely evening and drive safely.